Welcome to episode 66 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today we're catching up with South African middle distance runner Dominique Scott. Afternoon, Dominic, or morning for you, all the way in the US. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yeah, it's 11 a.m. here in Crested Butte, Colorado.
So we were just chatting now before we started recording. You're actually South African, but you're sounding a little bit American there.
Yeah, I moved across to the States in 2011 after matriculating from Rhenish Girls High School in Stellenbosch. I came across the States to run and study for the University of Arkansas, and unfortunately definitely picked up quite a bit of American twang. And I think just trying to fit in as a young 18-year-old, I just didn't want to be pointed out all the time that I had a different accent and be asked where I was from, and if I rode elephants to school or not, things like that. So because of all of that, just kind of picked up on the American accent. But yeah, so that's what it is.
Well, I suppose you have been there for almost 9 years now. So I suppose it would just be a matter of time. And you're married American, am I correct?
Yes, yeah. I married Cameron Eford, who's an American, back in December of 2015. So last July, I actually got my American citizenship, so I'm now a dual citizen.
Oh, that's good. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Let's go back to the early days of Dominique Scott, growing up in Cape Town. Were you always a runner, Dominic, or were you just playing all sorts of sports?
Yeah, so I grew up in Constantia in Cape Town. I went to Herschel Preparatory School and high school for a few years. And I played every sport I could. Like, my schedule was packed with sport. During summer months, I did team swimming, team water polo, I did triathlon, how I met Richard Murray, one of your other guests on your show. In the winter months, I played netball, field hockey, ran cross country. So I really tried to do as much as I could. I just love sports. I love being competitive. I also liked the team aspect. So even though I found myself being a better runner in most of the sports, I'd play wing and field hockey, or it was a wing and water polo because of the endurance aspect. I just loved sports, so I did as many sports as I could until my coaches said, "Hey, we think it's time that you start, coming to practice a little bit more fresh and specializing a little bit."
And when you had to make that decision, was it running?
Yeah, it was running. So like I said, I went to Herschel, and in grade 8, my mom entered me into my very first track race, which was at the old Greenpoint track. And I ran a 1500, and I remember I broke 5 minutes, and some of the officials came up to my mom and were like, "Hey, that's really, really good. Like, for Dom to break 5 minutes in her first 1500. And they were pretty impressed. My mom had never run track growing up. She had only gone for her first run at the age of 21, but then had gone on to be a pretty good ultra marathoner in South Africa. So she kind of knew the running scene, but she didn't know the track scene. And so she started looking for a coach for me and came across Johan Fourie out in Stellenbosch. And so twice a week after school, this was now like grade 8, my mom would drive me out to Stellenbosch, and I would train with Johan Fourie and his group of young athletes. And I loved it. It was so fun being part of his group. He called us the dog squad. And just like getting to run with other young athletes was awesome. But I really wanted to be training with them and training with Johan on a daily basis, but I couldn't ask my mom to drive me out to Stellenbosch from Cape Town every day of the week. So I started looking into becoming a boarder out in Stellenbosch. So that's what led me to Rhenish Girls High School. In the middle of my grade 9 year, moved out to Rhenish, became a boarder. And it was about the middle of my grade 10 year that Johan said, "Hey Dom, I think it's time that you slow down on your other sports and start like really putting all your energy into track and field and cross country, because we know that's what your future is, and you made the sacrifice of moving away from Cape Town and becoming a boarder for your running. And yeah, so that's kind of when that happened and how that happened.
And Tom, tell us a bit about that move from the one school to the other. It couldn't have been something very easy, especially so late in high school. I mean, you must have had all your mates at your original school and having to almost start again just 2 years with 2 years to go.
Yeah, honestly, it really wasn't easy. It's not something I talk about very often, or people even ask me about, but I was so at home at Herschel in Claremont. My mom was a teacher there. My sister was 3 grades below me. I had gone on the school cross country camp since I think I'd been like 7 years old, with my mom being the head coach. So I knew, not only all the girls older than me, younger than me, I knew all the teachers. Just felt like I'd been raised at Herschel and in Claremont.
Yeah.
So to be honest, when I first visited Rhenish on like a little day, my mom took me out there and I got to sit at the back of a class and got to see their assembly. I came home from that day and told my mom, like, I'm not moving, there's no way. It was also going from private school to public school, so there was a big difference in that. And a couple months later, I was lying in bed at night. I was just thinking about all the dreams that I had of wanting to be an Olympian and represent South Africa at an Olympic Games. And I knew that in order to take that next step closer to living out those dreams, that I needed to move to Rhenish. So I kind of bit the bullet and moved out there. But it really wasn't easy. I mean, this is going to sound super sad, but I remember my first week at Rhenish, eating some lunches in the bathroom because I knew no one, and it was the middle of the school year. And I think it was also, I was this girl that had come from a very privileged background in Cape Town, who was now coming to Rhenish to, be the sportswoman. And I think some girls felt like I was going to be taking their place too, as, the sporty girl at school. So the first couple months was definitely really hard, especially also being a weekly boarder. But it ended up being the greatest decision I ever made some amazing friends. The teachers were incredible. And training with Johan Fourie and his group on a daily basis, what took me to the next level and allowed me to get that scholarship to the United States.
Yeah. And during this time, do you remember, was there a really memorable result that you have, the one that stands out during your schooling career? Because it was all just 1,500. Hey? There was no 3,000 or 5,000 at that point.
Yeah, no, I was running the 1,500 3K. I don't remember running any 5Ks other than in cross country, but won some junior national titles. Came second to Castor in the 1,500 as a junior, and won the 3,000. But probably the most memorable result, probably two, I'll share two. One was my 1,500. I got to run at one of the Yellow Pages events, which I'm not sure if you remember those, but they were a big deal back in the day. So I felt very lucky as a junior to get invited to run at one of them. And it was at Stellenbosch, so it was my home track. I remember Renee Kalmer was in the race, and I broke 4:30 for the first time, ran 4:28. And it was that time, at the time, there weren't really any juniors running that fast. Right now, we have an abundance of amazing youth and junior track and field athletes that are coming up. So 4:28 probably doesn't sound very impressive to them, but back then we didn't have many young athletes that were running that quick. So that was amazing. It was such a cool experience to get to race in the Yellow Pages, next to Renee Kalmer, who had just been to the Olympics for that event, to get pulled along to a fast time. And I knew that time would get coaches' attention in the States. So that was super cool. The second event that stands out in my mind is running my first road 10K in Stellenbosch. I think it was the Women's Stake 10K, one of those events, and had never raced a 10K before, but did do a lot of 10K type training work in the fall. And so Johan was like, let's run a 10K. in our hometown and just see how you can mix up against the elites. And I ended up, the race finished on the Stellenbosch track, on Kutzenberg track, and ended up kicking in with the girl who won. I got second, but ran, I think I broke like 36 minutes for the, in my first 10K ever. I think I ran like 35 minutes, like 50 seconds, and I stand to be corrected, but whatever. That was definitely a little bit of telling that I had some future in the longer distances. And once again,
that's a phenomenal time for your first 10Ks. I mean, you must be incredibly proud of yourself.
Yeah, thank you. I think it was more about the fact that I got second as a junior. That was pretty cool. But yeah, that race also definitely showed me that, I had potential to take the sport a little bit further.
And tell me, during this growing up phase, did you have somebody that you were looking up to, someone like a little bit older whose career was also blossoming?
Yeah, I would probably say Renee Comet locally. She was definitely the athlete that I saw doing a lot of things that I wanted to do. Like she was competing in the Olympics, racing at a lot of big international races. And then internationally, I would say Zola Butt, not Zola, yeah, Zola Butt.
Yeah.
That she had, done a lot of things that I wanted to do too, and aspired to be alike.
And then obviously the big decision to move to the US, again, couldn't have been an easy decision, but tell us how that actually happened. I mean, and almost a twofold question: to hear your story, but also to give advice to youngsters who are going through a similar phase in their lives as you, and also want to look at the opportunities of getting a scholarship in the US.
Yeah, so my dad actually has a brother who lives in Raleigh, North Carolina, here in the States. And when I was 12 years old for Christmas, my dad flew my sister, mom, and I over to the States for the first time. And we visited my uncle and aunt and cousin in North Carolina for the Christmas holidays. And I was only 12 years old, but for whatever reason, my uncle and aunt decided to drive my sister and I to the neighboring universities. So it was like Duke and North Carolina State, some amazing universities with incredible campuses. So it was at 12 years old that I saw these campuses and thought, like, I want to be a student that gets to go here. And, they told me that you can get full scholarships as an athlete, for your 4 or 5 years of tertiary education. And it just sounded too good to be true. So at 12 years old, that seed was definitely planted of, hey, like I could use my sports to get me a scholarship to go to the States. And it was kind of my dad who kept reminding me of that throughout the years, because obviously as a 12-year-old, it still seemed very, very big. And then advice, I would say, just focus on the now and give yourselves little stepping stone goals. If you focus on the big goal, it's going to be a little bit overwhelming, and you may, get too scared or intimidated to ever make it there, to ever take the steps to get there, because it just seems so far away and so out of reach. But if you focus on the little steps to get there, I think it makes it a lot more manageable and a lot more believable. To be honest, I never thought I'd become an Olympian. So to still even say that is kind of surreal. So as a 12-year-old, I focused on the steps that I thought would help get me to that world stage. So it was knowing that I needed to be training with Johan Fourie and his group of athletes on a daily basis. So I made the move to Rhenish. From then seeing universities in the States and hearing that I could get a full scholarship for tertiary education, and knowing that the NCAA program in the States is just so competitive and will help me become a better athlete and give me all the tools I need to reach that professional level. So taking the step and kind of believing to go from Rhenish to the University of Arkansas. And, just like making those little goals along the way when I got to the States in 2011 and was a freshman, my now husband and I started dating pretty shortly after I got to the States. And I remember telling him that I was going to be an NCAA champion by the end of my 5 years at school. And he laughed at me. He laughed at me, and I cried. I don't remember the crying part, but I was really upset that, he didn't think I could also become become a national champion.
And you're still with him.
Yeah, I know, right? But I think he said to me something like, "I don't think you know how hard it is." But instead of being a freshman and just focusing on becoming a national champion, I knew there were a lot of smaller steps that I needed to accomplish before I got there. So it was, winning a small little meet at the University of Arkansas. Then it was trying to become an SEC, which is our conference champion, and then becoming a regional champion, and then becoming a national champion. I think if you focus too much on the big end goal, you'll just get overwhelmed and be intimidated. So that would be my advice to any young athletes, is just focus on the now, focus on what you can control, and set little goals to ultimately lead you to your big goal.
Yeah, well, that's amazing advice. Dom, you come across very family orientated, that you're obviously very close with your mom and dad and sister. Again, must have been a difficult move to leave all of them and move to the States. It's not as if it's the same time zone or, a quick flight to Joburg or whatever. It's bloody miles away.
It really is. Even though it had been my dream and aspiration since I'd been 12 years old, it was still the hardest thing I've ever done. 3 days before flying to the States, my parents also didn't come with me when I was coming over to the States. They said, "This is your thing. We totally support you, but you need to do this by yourself." Which, that's a pretty bold statement from my parents. They're very supportive, but that was a pretty big thing for them to do. But yeah, 3 days before leaving for the States, like I said, even though it had been my dream for like 6 years, I told my parents, I said, "I'm not going." I was so scared. My bags were, half packed, lying all over the house. And I was, putting as much stuff as I could into 2 suitcases. And yeah, I told them, I was like, "I'm not going." And my mom, crying, told me, she said, "You owe it to yourself to at least, go and see if you can do this." Because I'd put so much work and already had made a lot of hard choices and sacrifices leading to that point to try and make that happen. And, I'm so glad that my mom unselfishly pushed me into making that first step to the US, because I know it was hard on my parents too, and hard on my sister. They didn't want to not see me for months at a time, and have me 8 hours behind them and, time zones. It was, I think, equally hard for them as it was for me. So I really appreciate my parents supporting me and, pushing me into following my dreams.
And when you got there, was the coaching and the training a new level?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Lance Harder was my college coach, and he's just such a great guy. He really helped me become the athlete I am today. And yeah, he has an amazing program of track and field runners, from sprinters all the way to long distance runners. And he 100% knows what he's doing. But as a freshman, as an 18-year-old coming onto a team that also has 23-year-olds on the team and have been doing that training for 4 or 5 years is very intimidating. I remember, I came to the team, I was a little bit soft, didn't have a 6-pack, and you're now training with these girls that are lean and, just so mentally tough and, used to the training, kind of callous to the training almost, because they've been doing it for a couple of years. So yeah, it was definitely different. Obviously, there are some things that overlapped with Johan Farie's training. At the end of the day, it's just running, it's putting one foot in front of the other. But every coach kind of has their own spin and their own beliefs that they believe will help the athlete reach their potential.
And the teammates that you mentioned now, were they welcoming towards you, being from South Africa, riding elephants to school. I mean, there is a bit of ignorance in the US about what happens down here. Were you like, did you feel welcome?
Yeah, for sure. And honestly, that was one of the reasons I chose the University of Arkansas. I'd come over to the States just after I'd matriculated and visited 3 schools, and one of them, I say schools, universities, one of them being the University of Arkansas, and the girls on the team just seemed so sweet, so kind. I knew that they were going to be become family to me. So yeah, they were very welcoming, very understanding. They all loved my accent, you know, they loved all the different words I used, like zebra crossing instead of cross. That helped me make the States and make the University of Arkansas my new home.
Oh, that's lovely. And during this period, is this when you started running the 3 different distances, the 3,000, 5,000, and 10,000?
Yeah, it was my freshman year that I ran my first 10K on the track. It's actually a funny story. The first outdoor track meet of the year, so this was April of 2012, we were headed to the University of Stanford to race the Stanford Invite, and I was meant to be running a 5K. But because I'd never run a 5K on the track before, it was a heat that was going to be run in the morning instead of the evening. And my coach, Lance, came up to me on the plane on the flight over to California and said, "Hey, Dom, you're not in a very good heat, but unfortunately, there's nothing I can do about it because you don't have a seed time. But I think that you're in way better shape than this heat is going to allow you to run." So he kind of had me a little bit worried. He said, "Let me think about it," went back to sit at his seat, came back to me a few hours later and said, "Hey, so I've been thinking about it. I don't think I'm going to be able to get you into a faster heat. What if we run the 10K? And as a 19-year-old who is a first year at college in the States, who thought I was going to run a 5K and had been training for a 5K, it was a big shock to now hear, tomorrow night you may in fact run a 10K, twice the amount of laps. And I just remember looking up at him, he's standing in the aisle, and I said, "Coach, I didn't bring my racing flats." Like I knew I wouldn't run a 10K in spikes. Yeah. And he said something to me, he was kind of mad at me. He was like, "Why wouldn't you bring your racing flats? Like, you know, we're here to run," type of thing. And then like he calmed down and he said, "Okay, we'll go buy you a pair of racing flats. You're going to race the 10K." Because the 10K, there was only one heat, you know, because they could put a ton of athletes on the track at once. So the next evening, like 24 hours later, raced my first 10K on the track. And I kind of shot myself in the foot because I ran really well. I broke 34 minutes. I broke 30. Oh my gosh, I'm totally losing. I'm sorry. It's been a couple of years. No, I broke 35 minutes for the first time. I ran 34 something. And I remember everyone was super happy with me. My coach was happy. And the next morning, going out on a run with my teammates, and one of the upperclassmen and one of the older girls saying to me, "Dom, we're so glad that Coach Harder found his new 10K girl." And that was the moment that I realized, like, no one wants to be the 10K girl. It's kind of like tag you're it, you know, because you don't race that often. It's 25 laps on the track. It's not nearly as glamorous as racing the 1500. But, you know, in the moment, I was also very proud of the fact of what I had just accomplished. But yeah, that was when my freshman year was when I ran my first 10K on the track.
Because it's ridiculously far to think that you have to run around a circle 25 times. Certainly not my favorite. So of the different distances, 1500, 3000, 5000, 10, which is your favorite?
It's a hard question. Because what I'm better at and what I enjoy are 2 very different things. I don't think that any athlete could truly admit that they enjoy the longer distances. It's a lot more fun to just get the pain out of the way super quickly. I really enjoy running the mile and the 3K. I've run some really good miles, but my miles, my good miles have come off strength work. Paced race, I'm able to do pretty well. So in the New York Fifth Avenue mile, I've run a 4:19 before, which is in a full mile, which is pretty quick. On the track, I've run a 4:26 mile, which is pretty quick. If it was to be, unfortunately, going to be able to be as competitive. So for that reason, I've had to move up in distance. The 3K I really enjoy. It kind of has a soft spot in my heart. I won my first NCAA individual title in the 3K back in 2015. So I've just always enjoyed that. I've run pretty 10K and will end up being even the half marathon and marathon in the future. Just my new coach and I, Joe Bossard, and I are seeing that the further the event or the further the training, the longer the training run, the better I seem to do. So I really think that my future lies in the longer stuff, and I'm slowly coming around to it.
And do you think your future may lie in marathons?
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, it's been kind of hard for me to admit. I think, like I shared that story about when I ran my first 10K, I felt like the culture at Arkansas was that the shorter the event, the more glamorous the event. So I was kind of just brought up with that mindset. I'm now learning that that's not true. The marathon is a very cool event that obviously there are tons of supporters and spectators of the marathon. So I'm slowly changing my mindset and coming around to the fact that the marathon could be a really cool event. And I think that I'd be pretty good at it.
No doubt. Before we get to the Olympics and the dream, really, you've had some amazing results here in South Africa. You first in 2018 in the 5,000 meter, you became SA champ. You and Ilana Meyer are two ladies that have run the 5,000 under 15 minutes. You're the SA indoor 3,000 meter record holder. You're the SA national record for the indoor mile. Which of those stands out for you as your favorite?
Definitely breaking 15 minutes for the 5K last year. It was at the London Diamond League like late July last year, 2019. And it was so cool. It was a goal of mine for a while, and it kind of taken a while to get there and to accomplish it. I feel like the 5K is an event where, at least for me, it really needs to be the perfect race in order to go well. There's a lot of time for error, but there isn't much time to make up those errors because you're running pretty fast. So 1 or 2 slow laps, and it's going to be really hard to make up those seconds at the end. But London last year was just perfect. And my dad were there. My dad from South Africa, and it was just the perfect day. And yeah, to break 15 minutes in the 5K to become one of 2 women in South Africa who had ever done it before was very special.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely amazing, and we're all very proud. Let's talk about the Olympics. Finally, the dream had arrived. Obviously, 2016, and no doubt 2021 as well will come around. Tell us a bit about your Olympic experience.
Yeah, it was amazing. 2016, to be honest, it was just kind of overwhelming. I graduated from the University of Arkansas. I won both the 5K and 10K at the NCAA championships. A month later, I got to sign a professional contract with Adidas International. A few weeks after that, I got to run in my first professional race ever, which was the Monaco Diamond League. And while in Monaco, got news that I'd been officially selected to represent South Africa at the Rio Olympic Games in the women's 10,000. And getting to live out that dream was really surreal. Like I've shared, it had been a dream and a goal since I'd been about 12 years old. And to be the only South African female distance runner, you know, wearing the green and gold. We had some marathon runners, and we had Castor in the 8. I can't remember if she ran the 1500. But I was so proud to be representing South Africa, to be representing my home country. I had my family and my husband's family in the crowd. The stadium was not packed that day, so I could hear them cheering for me. It was just very, very special.
Yeah. And do you still consider yourself South African, or are you half-half now?
No, I'm very much still South African. I mean, I think just being an athlete makes me be more South African. You know, I think if I wasn't representing South Africa, then yeah, maybe I would drift more to the American side because I live here. But you know, my family is still in South Africa. All of my family is still in South Africa. My parents still have, you know, my bedroom painted with my pink walls in Constantia.
I hope you're coming home.
Yeah, my husband and I got married in South Africa. You know, I have to come home every time I want to qualify for a team. So I still feel very, very, very much South African. You know, being a US citizen now is a little bit easier in terms of living here. I don't have to be on a visa. But, you know, other than that, still very much South African.
So biltong over beef jerky then?
Oh my gosh, 100%. Beef jerky is gross.
And I hope for your husband as well. Just in closing, Dom, it's lovely to chat to you. What does the future hold?
That's a good question. So right now, I guess to take everyone back a few steps. So after graduating from the University of Arkansas, I stayed in my college town, which was Fayetteville in Arkansas, for a year and a half, still training with my college coach, and then I changed coaches to a new coaching group based out in Boulder, Colorado. And my coach is Joe Bosshard. And at the time, there were only 4 female athletes. Right now, we have, I think, like 11 athletes, 3 guys, and the rest girls. And after Doha last year, my husband finally gave in, threw in the towel, and allowed us to move out to Boulder. So I'm very excited to now be in Boulder at altitude full-time, training with my teammates and under my coach's guidance on a daily basis. 3 days ago, my teammates and I drove up to Crested Butte, Colorado, which is even higher altitude. It's about 9,000 feet up here. I think that's like double the height of Johannesburg. Yeah. And Boulder's pretty similar to Johannesburg. And we'll be up here in Crested Butte, Colorado, training for a month. Just kind of isolating ourselves because of COVID, but also getting in some really good training up high in the mountains. This summer, it's so hard to know what it's going to look like. You know, it could just be time trials. We don't know if we'll ever get to stand on the start line with competitors that are not our teammates. But if that's the case, it's fine. I've got lots of great teammates that we'll compete against each other to make sure we make the most of the season. And then, 2021 is, you know, definitely the goal. I had already qualified for the 5,000 for the Tokyo Olympics, and that qualification will still carry on to next year, even though the Olympics got postponed by a full year. So hoping that South Africa selects me for their team next year. That I'll get to wear the green and gold at the Tokyo Olympics, and then we'll kind of see. Tokyo will definitely be 5 or 10K, but after Tokyo, there's no telling. My coach and I bring up the marathon at least once a week, so I know it's around the corner, and I'm really excited about it. I feel like South Africa too has such a great legacy and also a lot of pride in their ultra marathons and marathon now, the Cape Town City Marathon being a big one. And I would love to come home and run those races and
Win
do
those
South
races.
Africa proud. Yeah, and win those races. Yeah, I'll just be honest.
And Olympics next year, you're not going to do 5 and 10. Would you choose between the one and the other?
We'll see. I actually haven't qualified for the 10,000 yet. They made the Tokyo standard quite a bit harder than the Rio standard. I have no doubt that I will be able to qualify. It's just, once again, I feel like the longer races, there are just fewer of them, and you really need them to go perfectly in order to run, as fast as you need to run. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens next year. I could totally see myself doubling, giving myself the challenge of running both the 5 and the 10.
Well, good luck. Dom, it's really been fantastic chatting to you today. Thank you so much for your time on Sport SA Daily Diary. Good luck with your training up there in the middle of nowhere. And we'll see you at Tokyo Olympics for sure.
Cool. Thanks so much, Adam.
Cheers. Don't miss tomorrow's episode of Sport SA Daily Diary, where we chat to the man with many world firsts, explorer Rion Manser.